The throne had slept for millennia, then a human stepped forward. The alarm did not wake me. I was already awake. I had been lying on my bunk for 2 hours staring at the ceiling of the observation deck corridor, listening to the ship hum around me, feeling the faint vibration that meant we were entering low orbit. The Resolute Accord was not a quiet vessel. She groaned when she turned, clicked when the temperature shifted, and breathed. That was the only word for it, breathed through her ventilation shafts like something alive and slightly irritated. I had grown fond of that noise in 8 months. It meant we were still moving. Cadet Voss, the voice came through the intercom above my head. Low, precise, with the flattened vowels of someone who had learned English from a translation matrix and never quite shaken it. The ambassador requests your presence in the forward observation bay. We will achieve surface orbit in 19 minutes. I swung my legs off the bunk. My boots were already on. I had not taken them off. My name is Sarah Voss. I am 26 years old. I hold the rank of cadet in the Galactic Compact's Diplomatic Survey Corps, which sounds more impressive than it is. I am the only human aboard the Resolute Accord. I am the only human in the Survey Corps, full stop. Humanity has been a member of the Galactic Compact for 40 years. In that time we have contributed 2 trade agreements, 1 border dispute, 11 cultural exchange programs, and me. I am, in the ambassador's words, a goodwill gesture made flesh. I try not to think about that too much. The forward observation bay was a wide, curved room at the nose of the ship, its transparent front wall giving a clean view of whatever we were approaching. When I arrived, the view was a dark world, Velketh, the charts called it, hanging in the middle of a pale star's light like a stone dropped in still water. It had no atmosphere worth mentioning, no liquid water, no life signals. What it had was age. It was, according to the Compact's historical records, the oldest artificially inhabited world in the known galaxy, abandoned so long ago that the species who built its structures were not even a memory. They were a footnote in a footnote. Ambassador Thale stood at the window, all 7 limbs folded in the particular arrangement that meant he was thinking hard. The Varini ambassador to the Galactic Compact Survey Corps was not a small being. He was also not unkind, which I had learned to appreciate. He simply operated on a scale that did not naturally include me. Cadet Voss, he said, without turning. You have read the briefing materials. 3 times, I said. Then you know what we are looking for. The throne of consensus. He turned then. His 4 upper eyes fixed on me with an expression I had learned to read as something between patience and caution. We are looking for its location. Its condition. Its structural integrity. We are not here to activate it, interact with it, or approach it without proper protective protocol. We are archaeologists today, not diplomats. Understood, I said. I understood. I also understood that 6 other species representatives were aboard this ship, and that every single one of them had privately requested the honor of being the first to stand before the throne if it was found intact. Thale had shared this with me not as gossip but as warning. There will be tension, he had said. There is always tension when old things are found. The throne of consensus was not a chair. That was the first thing the briefing made clear. It was a decision-making artifact, built by a civilization so far in advance of the current compact that its mechanics were still not fully understood. Whoever it accepted as arbiter gained access to 40,000 years of recorded arbitration, every dispute, every resolution, every war stopped and every agreement brokered in the compact's earliest history. The arbiter's word was binding under compact law. Not advisory. Binding. No appeal, no override, no delay. The last time it had activated, the arbiter it chose had kept 17 civilizations from destroying each other over a shared energy source. That arbiter had served for 60 years. When she died, a tall, gray-feathered being called the second voice of Marev, the throne went silent. It had not spoken since. 40,000 years of silence. And now we were in orbit above the world where it slept. The descent team assembled in the cargo bay. There were 9 of us, Thale, myself, and 1 representative each from the Dravosi, the Veth Collective, the Yenari, the Keth Soma, and the Pale Alliance. I knew their names. I had studied their species, their customs, their body language, their diplomatic histories. I was here to observe and document. That was my function. I had a data recorder clipped to my wrist and a spare battery pack in my jacket pocket and a notebook, actual paper, actual pen, tucked under my arm because my training officer back on Earth had told me that when everything else fails, a written record survives. We landed in a valley of black stone. The surface of Velketh was not dramatic. No towering ruins, no crumbling monuments. Just flat, dark rock that caught the pale starlight and gave it back in faint silver sheets. The structures were underground, the sensors said. We followed the readings down a wide, smooth ramp that had clearly once been a transit corridor, its walls so perfectly preserved that the air inside it felt newer than the air outside. The throne's chamber was at the bottom. It was larger than I expected. The ceiling disappeared upward into darkness. The floor was a single unbroken piece of dark material that was not quite stone and not quite metal, perfectly smooth, perfectly clean, as if it had been waiting to receive visitors and had spent 40 millennia preparing. At the center of the room, raised on a low platform, was the throne. It did not look ancient. That was the second thing that caught me off guard. It looked like something that had been finished yesterday, a tall, curved seat, made of the same dark material as the floor, with two flat armrests and a high back that tapered to a point. It was not decorated. It had no carvings, no markings, no indicator that it was anything more than a very well-made chair. But the moment we walked in, I felt it. Not in any dramatic way, not a rush of wind or a flash of light. Just a pressure, very faint, at the base of my skull. Like a sound at the edge of hearing. Thale spoke first. We will proceed with the skin protocol. No one approaches the platform. The representatives spread out along the edges of the room. They were all watching the throne. I was watching them, their posture, their movement, the way the Dravosi representative's secondary eyelids flickered, the way the Inari's feathers rose slightly along her neckline. They wanted it. All of them. They were trying very hard not to show it. The scanner swept the room. It took 40 seconds. Then it pinged, very softly, and the technician, a small, precise VETH collective member named Coordinator Oth, read the results in a flat voice. Structural integrity, 100%. Activation status, standby. The throne is functional. The room went very quiet. Standby, Thale repeated. It is waiting for a candidate. And then it happened. The throne lit up. Not dramatically, not all at once. A slow, spreading light from somewhere inside the dark material, white and clean and completely steady. It moved outward from the seat, crossed the platform, flowed across the floor, and stopped. Directly in front of one person. Me. I looked down at the line of light touching the toe of my boot. I looked up at the throne. The light was not bright. It did not hurt to look at. It was simply there, and it was pointing at me, and every being in that room was staring. Thale's voice, when it came, was very careful. Cadet Voss. Step back, please. I did not step back. I do not know why. I have thought about it many times since that moment, turning it over the way you turn a stone in your hand, looking for the reason. I was not brave. I was not certain. I was not feeling any particular surge of human pride or species loyalty. I was simply standing in front of something very old that had just decided, for reasons I did not understand, that I was the one it had been waiting for. And I looked at it, and I thought, well, someone has to find out what happens next. The pressure at the base of my skull sharpened. Not painful, focused. Like a question being asked in a language I did not yet speak, but was about to learn. Cadet Voss, Thale again, louder now. I heard you, Ambassador, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I'll be careful. I took one step forward. Then another. The light did not retreat. It held steady, waiting. Behind me I heard Coordinator Oth say, very quietly, to no one in particular, it has never done this. Not once in the historical record. It has never chosen before the candidate completed the approach protocol. I was not thinking about the historical record. I was thinking about the feeling at the base of my skull, which had now shifted into something that felt, bizarrely, like recognition. Like when you hear a piece of music you have not heard since childhood and your whole body remembers it before your mind does. The throne was not surprised to see me. That was what the feeling meant. The throne had been looking for something for 40,000 years, and it had not found it, and now it had, and it was not surprised at all. It had simply been waiting. I stopped at the edge of the platform. The light surrounded my feet like still water. Behind me, the chamber was absolutely silent. 7 representatives of 7 civilizations, each older than humanity's entire recorded history, were holding their breath. I put my right hand on the armrest. The white light turned gold. And the world ended. No, that is not right. The world did not end. The world expanded. 40,000 years of it poured through the palm of my hand in 11 seconds, and I did not die, and I did not break, and when it was over I was still standing, still breathing, and the throne's light was still gold, and Thale was across the room staring at me with all 4 of his upper eyes wide open in an expression I had never seen on a Varini face before. I would later learn that the expression was awe. In that moment, I just gripped the armrest tighter, took a long, slow breath, and tried to figure out what I had just agreed to. The 11 seconds felt like a lifetime and nothing at all. When I opened my eyes, I had not known they were closed. The chamber was exactly as I had left it. Same black floor, same high ceiling disappearing into darkness, same 8 beings standing frozen at the edges of the room, all watching me. But something had changed in the quality of the silence. It was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of people who were trying to decide very quickly what to do next, and had not yet landed on an answer. I let go of the armrest. My hand ached faintly, the way a hand aches after gripping something too tightly for too long. I looked at my palm. Nothing there. No mark, no change. Just my hand, steady, slightly pale. Voss, it was Lieutenant Drew Calloway, our Corps field officer, the only other human aboard, and the one person in the room who looked not awed but furious. Drew was 34, had 12 years of field service, and ran every situation through the same filter. What is the protocol, and is it being followed? Right now, his face said clearly, protocol was not being followed. Voss, step away from the platform. Right now. I'm all right, Drew. That is not the point. The point is you were told to observe. You were told, specifically, by the ambassador, in front of everyone, not to approach without authorization. The throne chose her. This voice came from across the room. Low, measured, carrying the particular weight of someone accustomed to being listened to. I turned. The Dravosi representative, a tall, blue-gray being named Delegate Soreth, had not moved from her position, but she was watching me with an intensity that felt almost physical. The skin designated her. She did not approach uninvited. She responded to a designation. She is a cadet, Drew said. She is the designated candidate, Soreth said. Those are different things. The room fractured along those 2 sentences. I stood at the center of it, at the edge of the platform, with the throne's gold light pooling around my feet, and I listened to 7 beings argue about me in 3 languages and 2 translation matrices. I did not try to interrupt. I was too busy processing what had happened in those 11 seconds. It had not been a flood. That was the wrong word for it, though it was the first one I reached for later when I tried to describe it. A flood implies chaos, water everywhere, no direction, no sense. This had been the opposite. It had been structured. It had been, if anything, organized in a way that no human archive has ever managed to be, not by subject or by date, but by weight. The heaviest things came first. The heaviest thing was grief. Not my grief. The grief of a being I had never met, in a body I could not imagine, standing in a room I could not picture, making a decision that could not be unmade. The arbiter of the 4th consensus, 38,000 years ago, ruling on a dispute that had consumed 6 solar systems. The records did not tell me what the dispute was. They showed me how it felt to resolve it, the specific texture of knowing that your word would determine whether a civilization survived or became a cautionary footnote. And then, more. Case after case, resolution after resolution, the long chain of arbiters stretching back to the throne's first activation, some confident, some terrified, some brilliant, some merely determined. All of them carrying the same thing. Not power. Power was the easy part. The hard thing was the knowledge that being wrong had consequences that outlasted you by millennia. All of this in 11 seconds. All of this still settling somewhere behind my eyes like sediment after a wave has passed. She should be examined. This was Coordinator Oth, precise as always. The activation process has neurological implications. She should be examined before any decisions are made. No decision is being made, Ambassador Thale said. He had moved closer while I was not paying attention. He was now only a few feet away, his folded limbs tight against his body in a posture I had learned meant he was containing something. Concern, most likely. We are pausing. We are returning to the ship. We are filing a contact report with the Compact Council and we are waiting for guidance. The throne does not pause, Delegate Soreth said. The people around it do, Thale replied. That, apparently, settled the immediate argument. We left the chamber the way we had come. The light from the throne followed me to the bottom of the ramp, and then stopped, and when I looked back it was still there, a faint gold glow at the end of the long corridor, patient and unblinking. The ship felt different on the way back up. Smaller. Everyone's footsteps were careful, like they were walking on something fragile. In the medical bay, our ship's physician, a compact-trained human named Dr. Ira Booth, who had been monitoring my vitals remotely since the moment the throne lit up, ran me through 3 separate neurological checks, 2 cognitive assessments, and a full cellular scan. She did all of it in near silence, which was unusual for Ira, who normally narrated her work in a steady stream of quiet commentary. Results, I asked, when she finally set the scanner down. You're fine, she said. She said it the way people say things they are surprised to be saying. Your cortical activity is elevated, significantly, but in a pattern consistent with accelerated information integration, not trauma. Whatever that thing put into your head, your brain is treating it like learning. She looked at me for a moment. How much do you remember? I'm not sure yet, I said. It's still settling. Settling, she repeated. Like sediment. She wrote something in her notes. I'd like to run the same checks again in 6 hours. I'll be here. She hesitated, then said, for what it's worth, and I know this is not a medical opinion, whatever happened in that room, you were standing up when it was over. Every record we have of that throne says the activation contact can be. She searched for the word, overwhelming. It was, I said. I'm still here. She nodded, and left me to it. The Compact Council's response came 4 hours later, while I was sitting cross-legged on my bunk working through a memory that had risen out of the sediment, a case from 11,000 years ago involving a water rights dispute across 3 inhabited moons, resolved by an arbiter who had no precedent to draw from and had made her ruling based on a principle so simple it was almost embarrassing. The message from the council was long. I read it twice. The short version was this: unprecedented situations require deliberation. No action to be taken. All parties to remain on the resolute accord until a compact review panel could be assembled. Estimated assembly time, 32 days. 32 days. I put the message down and went back to the memory of the arbiter and the water rights case. The next morning, the political machinery began in earnest. I heard it through the walls first, raised voices from the meeting room, 2 doors down the corridor from my bunk. By the time I dressed and made my way there, the argument had been going for at least an hour. Coordinator Oth was demanding formal documentation of the throne's designation process. Delegate Soreth was insisting the designation was legally binding regardless of the designee's rank or species. The Pale Alliance's representative, a quiet being named Archreader Pellin, whom I had barely heard speak in 8 months, was raising what she called concerns of civilizational precedent. Drew was not in the meeting room. I found him in the observation bay, watching Velketha's dark surface scroll slowly past below. You're angry, I said. I'm concerned, he said. About me. He was quiet for a moment. About what this does to Earth's position in the compact. You understand that, right? If this goes wrong, if you're somehow found unqualified, or the process gets challenged, or the Council decides to override the designation, Earth takes the damage. We've been in the compact 40 years. We are still on probation, functionally. If humanity's representative in the field causes a diplomatic incident involving the most significant archaeological find in 10,000 years. I know, I said. Do you? Yes, Drew. I know what I'm standing in the middle of. I also know I didn't choose it. He turned from the window. His face was tired. I know you didn't. That's not what worries me. He was quiet for another moment. What worries me is that you took one step toward it, and then another, and you didn't stop. No, I said. I didn't. He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. Why? I thought about the 11 seconds. About the grief, the weight, the long chain of arbiters stretching back to the beginning of recorded interstellar history. About the question I had felt, at the base of my skull, in a language I had not yet known. Because it asked me a question, I said. And I thought I might have an answer. Drew looked at me for a long time. Then he looked back at the dark world below. 32 days, he said. 32 days, I agreed. Below us, Velketh turned slowly in its pale star's light. Somewhere under its black stone surface, in a chamber that had waited 40 millennia, a gold light was still burning. It did not seem to be in any hurry. 3 days into the waiting period, the throne showed me its first real test. I was not standing at the platform. I was asleep in my bunk when it came, not a dream, exactly, but a memory surfacing from the sediment like something that had been waiting for a quiet moment to rise. The memory was of a ruling. Not any of the ones I had already processed. This one came with a question attached, direct and unmistakable, the same pressure at the base of my skull that I had felt in the chamber. An inhabited moon. 2 civilizations. 1 resource. The arbiter of that era had chosen based on precedent, the older claim, the longer history, the more established presence. The other civilization had been absorbed into the first within 3 generations. Not through force. Simply through the slow mathematics of resource access. They had not been destroyed. They had been made irrelevant. The throne did not tell me this was wrong. It showed me the ruling, and the outcome, and then it paused, the same pause I had felt in the chamber when the light touched my feet, and waited. I lay in the dark of my bunk and thought about it for a long time. Then I said, out loud, to the ceiling, the ruling protected the right. It didn't protect the people. Those are not the same thing. The pressure at the base of my skull eased, very slightly. Not an answer. Not approval. Just the particular silence of a question that had been heard. And the gold light in the chamber below, 40 meters of rock and silence away, continued to burn. Consul General Merith of the Dravosi arrived at Velketh orbit on day 8. I knew his name before I knew his face. Every diplomat in the compact knew his name. Merith had been the compact's senior consul general for 60 years, longer than humanity had known the compact existed. He was the kind of figure who appeared in briefing materials under headings like key stakeholders and influential parties, which was a diplomatic way of saying that when Merith spoke, rooms went quiet and stayed that way. He came aboard the Resolute Accord with 3 legal scholars, 2 cultural historians, and a personal aide who moved through the ship's corridors like someone measuring distances. No ceremony. No announcement. He simply appeared in the forward observation bay while I was eating breakfast alone at the small table near the window, and he sat across from me, and he put his hands flat on the table, and he looked at me. Merith was tall, even by Dravosi standards. His blue-gray coloring was deeper than Delegate Soritha's, his 4 eyes carrying decades of something that was not quite tiredness and not quite wisdom, more like the particular clarity that comes from having seen a great many things and concluded that most of them were predictable. He wore no formal insignia. He did not need to. Cadet Voss, he said. Consul General, I said. I would like to speak with you plainly, if that is acceptable. It is. He nodded once. I have reviewed the record of the activation event. I have consulted with the Compact's 3 senior historians on the subject of the throne's designation protocols. I have read every first-hand account of an activation event in the historical archive, all 11 of them. He paused. The throne designated you. I am not here to dispute that fact. I appreciate that. I am here, he continued, to make a case, which I will make to you directly because I believe you deserve to hear it from me rather than through channels. His eyes were level, steady. Not unkind. You are 26 years old. Your species has been in space for 40 years. The Galactic Compact has been operating for 8,900 years. The Throne of Consensus has been arbitrating disputes since before humanity discovered agriculture. Another pause. Those are not arguments against your character. They are arguments about scale. I set down my fork. I'm listening. The arbiter of consensus carries the weight of every civilization in the compact, he said. Not just the living ones. The extinct ones. The ones that no longer exist because of decisions made at the throne. Every species in this compact has been shaped, economically, politically, genetically, culturally, by arbitration rulings going back 9,000 years. When an arbiter rules, it is not one ruling. It is a thread pulled through the fabric of everything that came before and everything that will come after. He leaned forward slightly. Humanity has not yet earned enough history to feel the weight of that fabric. You cannot be faulted for that. But it is true. I was quiet for a moment. The pale starlight came in through the observation window and lay across the table between us. Everything you just said, I said slowly, is accurate. He blinked, a Dravosy gesture I had learned meant genuine attention. I am too young, I continued. My species is too young. I have no political history, no dynasty of thought, no centuries of civilizational development to draw from. I met his eyes. And yet, the throne had 9,000 years to choose from every species in the compact, including yours. It did not. It waited. It waited 40,000 years, and when it finally stopped waiting, it stopped for me. Machines malfunction, Meredith said. This one hasn't, I said. Not once. Not in 40,000 years. You said so yourself, you read the historical archive. He was quiet. I am not arguing that I am qualified, I said. I am arguing that the throne apparently believes the definition of qualified is something different than we assumed. And since the throne is the only thing in the known galaxy with the authority to define that term, we might want to take its opinion seriously. Meredith looked at me for a very long time. The legal scholars, visible through the baize glass door, were watching from the corridor. The aide who measured distances had stopped moving. You are not what I expected, Meredith said finally. What did you expect? Someone who would be frightened of me. I'm not frightened of you, I said. I respect you considerably. Those are different things. He said nothing for a moment. Then, very slowly, he picked up his own cup of whatever the Verini replicator had made him, something dark and steaming, and he held it in both hands and looked out at the black world below. Tell me, he said, what the throne showed you. I hesitated. Then I told him. Not all of it, not the grief from the fourth consensus arbiter, not the personal weight of the memories still settling. But the water rights case from 11,000 years ago. The ruling that protected the right and not the people. The question the throne had asked me afterward. When I finished, Meredith was still looking out the window. And what was your answer? He asked. I said the ruling was technically correct and morally incomplete, I said. That a just outcome requires attending to both the principle and the consequence, and that ignoring consequences is not neutrality, it is a choice. He turned from the window. His expression had changed. Not softened, exactly. Shifted. Who taught you that? He asked. Nobody, I said. I worked it out myself. From the throne's records. From thinking about it in the dark for 3 hours. He put his cup down. He looked at his hands. He said, very quietly, you understand that I must still make my formal case to the council. I know. You understand that the case will be thorough and well documented. I'd expect nothing less. And you understand, he said, that if the council finds in your favor, what follows will be significantly harder than anything you have faced in that chamber so far. I'm starting to understand that, yes. He stood. All 7 feet of him. He looked at me one final time, with an expression that was not quite approval and not quite its opposite, something in the difficult space between them. I will see you at the council hearing, Cadet Voss, he said. Consul General, I said. He left. The aide with the measuring walk fell into step behind him. The legal scholars followed in silence. Drew appeared in the doorway a minute later. He had clearly been listening from the corridor. He did not pretend otherwise. You held your own, he said. He let me, I said. He was testing, not arguing. And I looked out at the dark world below. Somewhere under all that patient stone, the gold light was still burning. I think, I said carefully, I passed. Drew made a sound that was not quite a laugh. You know what he's going to do now, right? He's going to go back to his ship and build the most thorough, most legally precise, most historically complete case against your appointment in the history of the compact. I know, I said. And you're not worried. I thought about the question at the base of my skull. The weight of 40,000 years settling behind my eyes like something that had always been there, waiting to be found. Not about the case, I said. The case is just arguments. I have arguments too. Then what are you worried about? I picked up my fork. My breakfast was cold. I ate it anyway. I'm worried about being wrong, I said. That's the one that keeps me up at night. Not Meredith. Not the council. The possibility that I'll make a ruling someday and get it wrong and the consequences will outlive me by 1,000 years. I set the fork down again. That's the right thing to be worried about. I think the throne knows that. Drew was quiet for a moment. Then he said, for what it's worth, and again, this is not a protocol opinion, that sounds like the right thing to be worried about. Thanks, Drew. Still think you're in over your head. I am, I said. Completely. I just think the throne knew that too, and chose me anyway. Outside the window, the pale star moved, and the black world turned, and 32 days became 24, and the hearing was coming, and I had work to do. The message from Earth arrived on day 17 and I almost did not open it. I knew what it would say. The Compact Council session was now public record. Meredith had filed his formal challenge 6 days earlier, and it had made the interstellar news networks within hours. Humanity's diplomatic office had been watching. My parents had been watching, probably, in the way parents watch things from very far away when they cannot do anything about them, with the particular helpless attentiveness of people who love someone in a situation they cannot fix. The message was from my mother. Her name is Carol. She is a secondary school history teacher in a town in the north of England where it rains more than feels reasonable, and she has no diplomatic training, no political instincts, and no understanding of interstellar law. What she has is a very clear sense of when her daughter is frightened and a gift for saying the one specific thing that cuts through everything else. The message read, I heard what's happening. I don't understand most of it. I know you didn't choose this. I also know you haven't walked away from it, and that tells me everything I need to know about how this is going to go. Be honest. Be careful. Come home when you can. I read it 4 times. Then I put it away and went back to work. The work was the throne's records. Specifically, I was now cross-referencing 2,000 years of arbitration precedent on a category the compact legal scholars called contested designation, cases where the legitimacy of an arbiter's selection had been challenged before or during their term. There were 11 such cases in the full historical record. In 9 of them, the challenge had been dismissed. In 2, it had succeeded, and both times the resulting power vacuum had produced consequences that lasted centuries. I was not trying to frighten myself. I was trying to understand. The records did not come to me as text I could read. They came the same way the first 11 seconds had come, as experience, as weight, as the felt sense of being inside a moment rather than observing it. It required concentration to hold the boundary between what was memory and what was present. IRA checked on me twice a day now and always asked the same question, where are you right now? I always answered correctly. But the question was getting harder to answer quickly, and we both knew it. On day 19, the crisis arrived. I was in my bunk when Coordinator Oth knocked on the frame of my open door. Oth always knocked on the frame, having learned early in our acquaintance that doors in human ships did not announce visitors. Voss, she said, there is something happening on the compact comm channels. The ambassador requests everyone in the situation room. Now. The situation room was a small, tight space near the ship's bridge, normally used for emergency briefings. All 9 of us packed in. The communications display showed 2 fleet signatures, one belonging to a species called the Tharen, one to their longtime rivals, the Kethsoma. They were in the same system, which they were not supposed to be. The disputed corridor between their respective territories had been under a compact monitoring agreement for 30 years. The agreement had just lapsed. Both fleets were holding position. Neither was firing. Both were transmitting, loudly and repeatedly, that the other had violated the terms of the expired agreement, and that if the compact did not intervene immediately, they would be forced to take protective measures, which was the diplomatic phrase for something that was not protective at all. The Compact's Arbitration Council was deadlocked. 3 members recused themselves due to prior relationships with one or both parties. The remaining panel could not reach the required majority. The situation had been escalating for 6 hours before anyone thought to check whether there was a functioning arbiter who might have standing to issue a temporary holding order. There was. She was in a small room on a survey ship orbiting a dead world, 19 days into a waiting period, eating her 3rd cold meal of the week. Thale looked at me across the Situation Room's cramped table. His expression was the most careful I had ever seen on a Varini face. Under Compact law, a designated arbiter has provisional authority in emergency situations pending formal confirmation, he said. This is not settled case law. It has been invoked twice in the historical record. Both times, the ruling held. He paused. I am not telling you what to do. I know, I said. Drew, beside me, said nothing. He was looking at the fleet signatures on the display. 2 fleets. Thousands of lives. A corridor neither side could agree to share. I pulled up the throne's records. Not from the platform, from memory, from the sediment, from the 11 seconds that were still settling. The corridor dispute between the Dharen and the Kethsoma had a history going back 400 years. I could feel the shape of it, the agreements made and broken, the monitoring periods that had served as substitutes for actual resolution, the way both sides had learned to use the Compact's machinery not to solve the problem but to delay it indefinitely. The temporary holding order was the obvious move. Stop the immediate threat, return both fleets to their previous positions, extend the monitoring agreement by 90 days while a formal panel was assembled. But a temporary holding order would not solve anything. It would reset the clock and leave both civilizations exactly where they had been for 4 centuries, waiting for the next lapse, the next standoff, the next opportunity for the problem to become an emergency. I thought about the water rights ruling from 11,000 years ago. The one that had protected the right and not the people. I thought about what Mareth had said, a thread pulled through everything that came before and everything that will come after. I looked at the fleet signatures. I need 40 minutes, I said. Thale looked at the comm display. We may not have 40 minutes. How long do we have? Coordinator Oth checked the transmission logs. Both fleets have requested compact response within 2 hours. 40 minutes is feasible. Then I need 40 minutes, I said. I went to my bunk. Not for comfort, for quiet. I sat on the edge of the mattress and I worked through the records, pulling up every corridor dispute in the archive, every case where 2 parties had been in the same configuration, territorial, historical, resource-based, and looking for the common thread that had produced lasting resolutions rather than temporary pauses. There were 7 cases that matched the pattern. In 6 of them, the temporary fix had become permanent by default. In one, a case from 6,000 years ago, resolved by an arbiter named the Deep Voice of Yenther, the corridor had been restructured into shared administration with clear resource division and a joint monitoring body that replaced the Compact's oversight entirely. 6,000 years later, those 2 civilizations were trading partners. I worked out the framework. It was not complicated. It did not require anything from either party that was not already in the existing agreement, it simply redistributed the existing terms more precisely, replacing the monitoring period with a permanent joint structure that neither side had to trust the other to maintain, because the structure itself did the maintenance. 38 minutes. I walked back to the Situation Room. I sat down. I looked at the comm display. I said, very calmly, patch me through to both fleets simultaneously. Open channel. There was a moment of silence. Then Thale said, patching. The channel opened with a soft tone. I could hear the ambient sounds of 2 fleet bridges, different frequencies, different acoustics, the particular quality of open-channel military comms. I spoke. I did not announce my title or my designation or my species. I just spoke. I told both fleets that I was issuing a provisional emergency ruling under compact law. I told them both fleets would hold their current positions. I told them the existing monitoring agreement was being replaced, not extended, replaced, with a joint administrative framework, the terms of which I outlined in 6 clear points. I told them this ruling was binding pending confirmation by the Compact Council, and that if either fleet moved while I was speaking, I would note it on the record and the Council would be informed. Nobody moved. When I finished, the channel was quiet for 5 seconds. Then the Tharn fleet commander said, in a voice that was clearly surprised, "What species are you?" "Human," I said. Another pause. "And you have authority to issue this ruling?" "The throne designated me," I said. "I don't know if that gives me the authority. I know it gives me the responsibility. If you'd like to dispute the ruling, you can take it to the council in 32 days when my confirmation hearing is scheduled. In the meantime, hold your positions." The channel stayed open for another 10 seconds. Then the Kethsoma fleet commander said, in a very flat voice, "Acknowledged." The Tharn commander, a moment later, acknowledged. I closed the channel. The situation room was quiet. Everyone was looking at me. Drew's face was completely unreadable. Coordinator Oth was already documenting. Thal's folded limbs had relaxed into something that might, in a Varini, be called relief. And then my data recorder chimed. A message, incoming. No identification. Just one line. I did not rule in favor of either side. That was all it said. No name. No origin marker. But I knew Maritha's phrasing. I had heard it once before, from the other side of the same observation. I read the message twice. Then I put the recorder in my pocket. "Well," said Coordinator Oth, looking at her documentation, "we will have a great deal to file." "Yes," I agreed. "We will." Outside the situation room, somewhere far down the corridor, I heard Drew laugh, just once, quietly, to himself. I did not say anything about it. Some things are better left unacknowledged. I went back to work. The Veth Collective filed their challenge on day 27. 5 days before my confirmation hearing. 2 days after the Tharn and Kethsoma provisional ruling had held, both fleets had maintained their positions, the joint framework was being reviewed by compact legal teams, and the corridor dispute for the first time in 4 centuries had produced something other than a temporary pause. I would have had more time to feel good about that if the challenge had not landed in my message queue at 0600 hours like a cold hand on the back of the neck. The Veth Collective was the oldest civilization in the Galactic Compact. Not the most powerful, power shifts, and the Veth had learned long ago that direct power was inefficient. They were the most established. Their legal department employed 300 scholars, some of whom had been practicing interstellar law for longer than Earth had existed as a unified planet. When the Veth filed a formal challenge, it did not arrive as a message. It arrived as a document, 412 pages, translated into every compact language simultaneously, archived in the official record before I had finished reading the subject line. The document argued, systematically and with extensive historical citation, that the Throne of Consensus had experienced a functional anomaly. Not a malfunction, the Veth were too careful for that word. An anomaly. A deviation from established pattern. And as a result, the designation of Cadet Sarah Voss as arbiter was procedurally void, the provisional ruling on the Tharn-Kethsoma corridor was non-binding pending review, and the throne should be placed under compact protective custody until a full technical assessment could be completed. If the council accepted this challenge, the throne would be decommissioned. Not temporarily. Permanently. The document's final section, very calmly, made the case that an arbitration system that could not reliably select qualified candidates was a liability rather than an asset, and that the compact had operated successfully for the past 40,000 years without a functioning arbiter, and could continue to do so. What the document did not say, and what everyone who read it understood immediately, was what the Veth Collective would gain from a compact without an arbiter. The compact's arbitration system was the one mechanism that placed every civilization, ancient or new, large or small, on equal legal footing. Without it, disputes reverted to negotiated agreements, which reverted to power dynamics, which reverted to a very simple equation: the strongest voice wins. The Veth Collective had the strongest voice. I read all 412 pages. It took me most of the day. I read them the way the throne had taught me to process things, not looking for what was wrong with the argument, but looking for where the argument was honest. Because the Veth's case was not entirely wrong. It was built on real concerns, backed by real precedent, and structured by people who understood interstellar law in ways I was still learning. Dismissing it would be easy. Understanding it was the work. By the time I finished, it was late. The ship was quiet. Drew was asleep. Thale was composing his own response. IRA had brought me tea at some point and I had drunk it without noticing. I sat at the small desk in my quarters and I thought. The Veth were arguing that the throne had broken pattern. And they were right, it had. I was a break in pattern. Every arbiter before me had come from a civilization with centuries of compact history behind them. Every arbiter before me had been designated from a candidate pool that included the most experienced diplomats, jurists, and peacekeepers in the galaxy. I was a cadet. I had 8 months of field experience and a paper notebook. But here was the thing the Veth's 412 pages had not addressed, because they could not address it without undermining their own argument. The throne had never been wrong. Not about the pattern itself, it had been wrong about plenty of things, the historical record made that clear, but about candidates. In 40,000 years of selections, no designated arbiter had been found to be a fraud, a bad actor, or an incompetent. The throne's record on candidate selection was, as far as anyone could determine, perfect. You cannot argue that a perfect system malfunctioned. You can only argue that the result it produced was inconvenient. And inconvenience is not a legal standard. I started writing my defense. Not with citations, not with historical precedent, those would come later, and I had them, and they were good. I started with the argument itself, because I had learned in the past 3 weeks that in a room full of very old civilizations, the thing that cut through wasn't complexity. It was clarity. I wrote for 4 hours. On the morning of day 32, I stood in front of the Compact Council's emergency session and gave the clearest speech of my life. The council chamber was nothing like the throne's chamber. It was large, clinical, bright with artificial light, designed for efficiency rather than awe. 47 representatives from 31 compact member civilizations, connected through a combination of physical presence and holographic relay. Merith was there, seated with the Dravosi delegation, his expression as unreadable as it had been the morning we sat across from each other over a cold breakfast and decided to be honest. The Veth Collective senior legal scholar spoke first. Her name was Archjurist Theva, and she was very good. Her presentation was precise, measured, and utterly confident. She walked the council through the Veth's argument in 45 minutes, never raising her voice, never reaching for drama. She did not need to. When she finished, the council chair asked if I had a response. I said I did. I stood up. I did not read from my prepared notes. I had them, 4 pages, handwritten, in my jacket pocket, but I did not read from them. The throne's records had taught me that reading from notes is what you do when you are performing certainty. What I had was not certainty. What I had was something more useful. I said, the Veth Collective's argument rests on a reasonable premise. The throne designated a candidate outside established pattern. This is true. But the argument then makes a leap that the record does not support. It assumes that deviation from pattern is evidence of malfunction. I would like to suggest that this assumption reveals something important about how the Compact has come to understand the throne's purpose. I paused. 47 delegations were watching. The throne was not built to select the most qualified candidate from the existing pool, I said. I spent 3 weeks reading the activation records and the designation protocols, and I can tell you with confidence that qualification in the conventional sense was never the primary criterion. The criterion was something older than qualification. It was this: can this being carry the weight of a decision without being shaped by the weight of their own history into someone who makes the same decision every time? I let that sit for a moment. Every civilization in this chamber has centuries of accumulated certainty, I said. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. You know your position, your history, your place in the Compact's structure. That certainty is your strength. It is also, according to the throne's own records, the single most consistent factor in the failures of past arbiters. I looked at the Veth delegation. Archjurist Theva, you argued that my species is too young to carry this responsibility. I am asking you to consider the possibility that what you are calling youth, the throne is calling something else. The throne has had 40,000 years to select from the most experienced, most qualified, most ancient civilizations in the galaxy. It waited. It did not wait because it was broken. It waited because it was looking for something specific, and specific things take time to appear. I reached into my jacket pocket. Not for the notes, I left those there. I pulled out the small recorder instead, and I set it on the table in front of me. 3 weeks ago, I said, Two fleets held position for 2 hours on a provisional ruling issued by a 26-year-old human cadet with 8 months of field experience and no formal arbitration training. They held position not because my authority was unquestionable. They held it because the ruling was correct. The Tharn and Kethsoma commanders are not fools. They know when an argument holds and when it doesn't. I looked at the chamber. So do the people in this room. Silence. The Veth Collective has the right to challenge this designation, I said. That right is protected under compact law and I would not move to limit it. But I am asking the Council to look at the challenge honestly. Not as a legal question about designation protocol. As a question about what kind of compact you want to have going forward, one in which the arbitration seat is occupied by whoever this chamber finds most convenient, or one in which the throne's judgment is trusted, as it has been trusted for 40,000 years, even when that judgment is inconvenient. I picked up the recorder. I sat down. The chamber was quiet for a very long time. Merith was the first to speak. He did not address the council chair, he addressed the chamber directly, which was technically a protocol breach, but no one moved to stop him. I filed a formal objection to this designation 9 days ago, he said. I want the record to reflect that I withdrew that objection 4 days ago, following events that persuaded me the designation was sound. He paused. I did not announce that withdrawal publicly because I did not wish to be seen as influencing the council's deliberations. I am announcing it now because I will not sit in this chamber and pretend to be neutral when I am not. He looked at the Veth delegation. Archjurist Thiva, your argument is excellent. It is also wrong. The distinction is important. Thiva did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice was level. Your personal endorsement of Cadet Voss is noted, Consul General. It does not constitute legal precedent. No, Merith agreed. The Tharn and Kethsoma corridor ruling does. The council voted 4 hours later. The challenge failed. 31 for dismissal, 14 for review, 2 abstentions. The Veth Collective's 4 legal scholars filed a counter-record immediately and left without speaking to anyone. Thiva, however, paused at the chamber door. She looked back at me. She said, very quietly, you have a great deal still to learn. I know, I said. The throne will not wait for you to finish learning. I know that too. She looked at me for a moment longer. Then she said, with something in her voice that was not approval but was not its opposite, do not make us regret this. I'll try not to, I said. She left. Drew was waiting in the corridor outside. He looked at me with the expression of someone who has been holding their breath for several hours. Well, he said. 31-14, I said. He closed his eyes briefly. Right, he opened them. Right. Okay. You can say it. Say what? Whatever it is you've been not saying for 3 weeks. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I still think you're in over your head. I know, I said. I also think, he said, more slowly, that being in over your head and doing it anyway might be the most human thing I've ever seen. I laughed. It surprised us both, a real laugh, the kind that comes out of relief and exhaustion and the sudden release of something you have been holding very tightly for a very long time. It echoed in the corridor. A Dravosi aide walking past looked alarmed. Come on, I said. Let's go back to the ship. We walked back through the compact facility's long corridors, out into the cold light of Velketha's pale star, across the landing field to the Resolute Accord's cargo ramp. I put my hand on the ramp's railing and felt the familiar vibration of the ship's systems, the particular hum that meant she was still running, still breathing, still slightly irritated. That evening I went back to the chamber. Alone this time. I had asked for the access, and Thale had given it without comment. The path down the transit ramp was familiar now. I had walked it a dozen times in the past 32 days, never all the way to the throne, always stopping at the edge of the chamber to check on the gold light and confirm it was still there. This time I walked all the way to the platform. The light was steady. It had not dimmed in 32 days. It had not flickered. It had not shifted color or changed intensity. It had simply been there, patient, the way very old things are patient, not because they are calm, but because they have long since stopped measuring time the way young things do. I sat down. Not tentatively, not ceremonially. I just sat down, the way you sit in a chair at the end of a very long day. The throne adjusted, I had no better word for it, to the particular shape of how I held myself. The armrests were exactly where my arms needed them to be. The height was exactly right. The gold light surrounded me completely. And the throne was quiet. No pressure at the base of my skull. No question rising from the sediment. No memory of grief or weight or the long chain of arbiters stretching back into deep time. Just quiet. And the light. And 40,000 years of history sitting still for a moment, letting the newest part of itself simply exist. I thought about my mother's message. Be honest. Be careful. Come home when you can. I thought about Maritha's note after the corridor ruling. The single sentence. I now believe you. I thought about Thiva at the door of the chamber, do not make us regret this. I thought about what the throne had told me, in the first 11 seconds, without words. Not that I was chosen because humanity was special. Not that youth was a virtue. Not that uncertainty was better than wisdom. Just this, every civilization in the compact knows what it is. Knows what it believes. Knows what it will decide before the case is even presented, because 4,000 years of history have shaped a groove so deep that thought flows into it automatically, without friction, without doubt. Doubt is not weakness. Doubt is the thing that makes you check your work. I had a very great deal of work ahead of me. Cases I could not yet imagine, decisions I was not yet ready to make, the slow and difficult business of learning to carry 40,000 years of precedent without being buried by it. I would make mistakes. I knew that. The throne had never promised otherwise. But I would check my work. That, I could promise. Outside, Velketh turned in its pale star's light, a dead world that had waited 40 millennia to be useful again. Inside, in the long corridor that led back up to the surface and the ship and the compact and everything that came next, the transit ramp was quiet. I sat in the throne for a long time. Not because I was communing with it, or processing new records, or asking it questions. Just because the day had been very long and the chair was, against all reasonable expectations, comfortable. Eventually I stood up. The gold light did not go with me when I left, it stayed where it was, steady and unhurried. But I had the feeling, walking back up the ramp, that it knew exactly where I was going and was entirely unconcerned. It had waited 40,000 years. It could wait a few more. I had work to do. I had been in the compact for 8 months as a gesture. I intended to leave as something else. I was 26 years old, and I was the arbiter of consensus, and I had only just begun.